Okay, so now we're ready to actually start painting. As you can see, I have my workspace set out and I'm actually painting this flat. I just prefer that. If you want to go onto an easel and paint it that way, that's fine. As you can see, all my colours, they are fairly limited. We're going to keep to these colours throughout the whole painting. And you can see I've got linseed oil thinners, and I've got one of the most important things, liquid. I love that stuff because it dries the oil so fast, we don't have to wait days. Also, I like to use watercolor brushes rather than oil brushes. It's just something that I prefer. I like the flow and I like the way that they feel. So, but if you want to use oil brushes, that's fine. We've got our color reference, we've got a paper mask around the area. The reason why we're putting a paper mask there is from years ago I found that it was easy when you've got a big painting to do is to work in small areas. It'll all come together later. After all, it's only paint and we can change as we go along. We can do whatever we want. Now you can see I've started painting the face and I'm starting to fill in the shapes, and I started with going dark, and we'll fill in these shapes individually. One thing which I don't use is black. I never use black. I don't like the way that it looks when it goes down. It looks very flat and can make skin tones especially appear a little bit dirty. So for this I'm using a little bit of Payne's Grey with Van Dyke Brown. And it's just a process of filling in those individual shapes. You've got to keep the reference near you so you can see where the shapes, what they refer to, for the darkness and the contrast. So you've got to keep the reference close by so you can refer to it and start to paint away. In many respects, it's kind of like painting by numbers without the numbers. But really, who cares as long as we end up with a good picture at the end of the day. This is going to take a lot of frustration out of the painting and what you're thinking and what you're deciding. One of the most important things with painting and trying to get something close to realistic is that you're going to paint what you see and not what you think you see. And here we are painting what we're seeing because we have the guidelines and we can just go ahead and fill them in. Now I'm not changing much in the way of colour. I'm not adding anything else from the other palettes at this moment. It's just basically the Van Dyke Brown and the Payne's Grey. As you can see, I'm not taking too much care with keeping with the exact lines. I just want to know where everything is and map it out. You can actually do it right to the line if you wish, but you know, there's going to be a point where we're starting to add the light colors and they'll shade in together, and you will start to see where it begins to come together. Now don't be afraid of going too dark or going too light, because we could always adjust that later. At the moment I just feel that the colors that I'm using are about right. Keep on going until we fill in all the black areas to a certain point. Now you can see we're putting in a bit of the background. I'm just using a little bit of the cadmium orange and a touch of the yellow ochre along with a little bit of the Van Dyke Brown. So we don't want it too dark. We know that the background's dark, but we're going to darken that up later. What I'm trying to do now is just put in some kind of depth of field into the actual painting itself to give a reference point to the edges of the face. And as you can see, even at this early stage, we're starting to get something that resembles the reference. Now all paintings are going to go through that stage where you think they look terrible, but this will just take you beyond that. Don't worry about that at this moment. Now we are coming in with a very thin mix of Van Dyke Brown. Now we're just trying to smooth the edges out, as you can see. I always use liquid when I'm mixing the colour. Whenever I put the colour onto the canvas, there's a certain amount of liquid that is in the paint. The linseed oil I use for maybe a flow and the thinners, just to help thin it down. I don't always use them, sometimes I'm just using straight liquid. Now we're coming in with the lighter tones. This is almost white. What I've done here is just add a little bit of yellow ochre in with the white, and we are now following the lines, looking at our reference and just painting in the light areas. Now we've got to continue to do this till we get all this area filled. And then we're going to blend the edges with the dark areas, just to smoothen things out. Now, as you can see at the moment, we haven't really used any kind of what you could call skin tones. That's because the lighting in the original image makes this a very easy process. You're getting the character of the person and you're not worrying about skin tones. Although it will start to appear that you're getting the skin tones right. As you can see, I'm just keep on going, smoothing areas over. until we basically get it to where we want. We're going to, you notice that we're going to change some of the darks and lighten them up, as considering we're just pulling some of that white from other parts so that we've got a nice blend going on. And then we move the reference a bit closer to where we want to paint. And up we go again. Now this is a mix that's similar to what we tried to put down for the background. It's once again yellow ochre, the cadmium orange, a little bit of Van Dyke brown, and here we've actually put a little bit of Payne's grey into it. And as you can see, we start blending that in. We're kind of still loosely following those lines. You can still see them a little underneath the paint. And we're just keeping our reference there as a guide, just to help us. We're going to continue in this fashion until we get to a certain stage and then stop. We're not going to finish it off within this video. So now we're going to change our colour because we want to get some of the hair in. And there we go with this is mainly Payne's grey with a good chunk of Van Dyke brown in there. And we're just trying to put in the hair to get some kind of reference to where the hair is going and get some of those values of colour for the darkness. Always remember, if you make a mistake, you can easily just get a rag and wipe it off. That's the beauty of oil paint. There we go, we just blended it into the background a bit. Not getting too fussy or overly fussy. So now we just go and change our colour again. We're just trying to just add a bit more cadmium orange to the brush, just to give it a bit more lighter feel. Not so much Payne's grey in this. We're just trying to get the tonal values right. We're just taking each section at a time. We don't want to become overwhelmed by masses of paint going on and not being able to work with it. So now this is done, we're going to have to come and change this forehead a little bit. So we go back to our white. Now I'm here and you can see actually that the the white that I first used, you can see the color difference of the yellow compared to the white that I'm putting in now, which is just straight titanium white. So once again, we're just completing the edges, just getting a bit more of a tonal value there. Don't forget, we're going to finish this off when we come to do the background. There we go, we just continue. Let's run that up a little bit there into the hairline. I pulled a bit of dark into that, so I'm just going to load the brush up again. There we go. Now taking good notice of the shapes that you're painting and how the brush actually makes those marks. It's going to make things a lot easier. And don't be too fussy about getting it exact. In this case, it's a person that nobody really knows. We're not doing somebody's grandfather or somebody's uncle. So if it's not exactly right, it's not going to matter too much. What we're aiming for is just trying to get the same feel as what we see on the reference. There we go, we just do these little spots to give some kind of texture to the skin. And we continue. Kind of then tend to go back and forth with the colors. As we start doing the lights, we can see we need some more color in the dark areas. So as I said, you paint what you see, and this is what we're seeing in the reference. And all we're using here is just more of the cadmium orange, and there's actually a little bit of cadmium red that's gone into that. And then we come back with the white. So we progress, basically doing the same thing, swapping the color on the brush from light to dark. Keep on putting those details in because we do want this to be around about 80% finished when we're done. So as you can see how we've been working away, we're gradually getting closer and closer to the reference. At this point we're starting to lose some of the lines, so you're going to have to rely on your eye a little bit. But that's not too difficult, because if you Painted all the dark spaces in, first of all, as they should be. You shouldn't be too far off. There we go. Once again, I'm just using straight white because you have the color difference underneath. As you can see, some of these areas we're actually mixing and blending the paint on the canvas. I tend to do this quite a lot. And I think I do this because you go back and forth to the palette so many times that over the years it's just become a bit of a habit to just mix a bit of the colours in on the canvas. There we go, we're just going in there trying to adjust the shapes a little bit. Now we move the reference down so that we can continue with the rest of the face. So we continue putting the detail in and blending it slightly. Once again, we're not going crazy with colors, we're using the same colors as what we've been using before. You can see that there's a bit more blending going on in the canvas. So I think we've got to pull out and take a look at it. We're getting there. Yeah. It's not too bad, we're getting there. Okay. So now if you've got to this part, I think you should be feeling, it's not looking too bad. There's a lot of improvement to be made, but it's only the beginnings. And so we continue with this process going through until we get to a stage where we want to maybe darken up this background a little bit. For this we're using a lot more of the Van Dyke brown, a little bit of the orange, just a touch of the grey. Don't forget to keep on adding liquid into it. Don't forget to keep on adding liquid to it, and just adjust the amount of linseed oil or thinners so that it flows. It's very difficult to show that I'm using X amount of thinners or X amount of linseed oil. That's something which you'll notice when you put the paint down on. If the paint is too opaque and you want it to be a bit more translucent, just add a little bit more linseed oil. You can see it's starting to come together. So the background's going in darker. This is going to give us more of a feel and contrast. As you can see, I just took a little bit of the cadmium orange onto the brush while it was still loaded with the Van Dyke brown. As we've done the background, a lot of paint is gone from the brush, so that means that it's nice to be able to use to start blending. So we keep on going. It's more of a dry brush at the moment, and we're just getting rid of all those harsh little lines, and we're giving it a bit more of a softer feel. Once it's all been softened, you can see we're doing a little bit of a stipple just to give it a bit more texture. But then I'm going to come in and do a little bit more detailing. So once again, we're using the same basic colors. We're just looking at our reference and we're just softening areas up, getting the tonal values right. Here I use a big brush just to give it a bit more of a softer feel. This is a very dry brush. There's no paint on this, because we're just trying to smoothen things out. You need a very light touch to do this. If you go too heavy, you'll just smear all the paint. Now that we've got it all softened up a little bit more and we've got more paint going onto it, it's time to start putting in some more highlights. Once again, because the colours have all been blended, they've lost some of that stark whiteness. So we're going to come in again with some white. This is just pure titanium white. And we're just going to paint over some of the highlighted areas. Yeah, you can see that this is fairly opaque, although the brush has still got liquid in it. It doesn't really have much in the way of linseed oil or thinners. And as we work our way through the face, we're just getting those highlights in. So let's get in the rest of the head. So we're just gonna, once again, this is Van Dyke Brown, Payne's Grey, and this has got obviously the liquid in it, but it doesn't have much in the way of linseed oil or thinners. And the amount of paint that's on the brush it's fairly dry. It's not loaded up to, because we just want to get a base down. You can see we're going over the top of the head and just filling all this in. Now as we're filling this in, we're just going to be careful that we're just going to go around the marks that we made for the ear. The ear in this case it looks a little bit strange because of the angle of the head and also because of the lighting. So we really want to keep a close attention to keeping within those lines. Otherwise, the ear might start looking a little bit deformed. I'm getting a bit more of a depth to the paint now. Now we started putting in more of the background. Here is yellow ochre. We've got a little bit of the Van Dyke Brown mixed in with that. As if you look at the reference, there is the background behind it. The Pianist is lighter than the background. And once that is done, we can then go back and we're doing a bit more detailing. As you can see, we're getting a bit more aggressive with the contrast. As you can see, we've actually added a little bit of the cadmium yellow into the paint. There's a little bit of cadmium yellow, a little touch of the yellow ochre, and we've just toned that, the white paint down. You can see that we're getting a little bit more involved with the details. The details with this picture are actually what's going to really make it, because there's not much in the way of form. Now there's subtle changes to the colour of the brush, and a lot of those changes are going to be blended actually on the canvas. As you can see, we're just working our way through the picture, changing the paints as we feel. Gotta get all those little details in. So now we're getting somewhere with this, which is starting to look like it's on the right track. Continue with those details, get the fine elements in. Okay, so we've managed to subtly build up the form. Got to say that it's not completely correct at the moment, but at this stage that doesn't really matter. Now we'll pull the mask off and we've got more of a contrast in the face against the background, so we're then just going to build up the paint for the rest of the head. Now this little flesh color which I'm using here just happens to be the cadmium orange, yellow ochre, a little bit of the Van Dyke brown, And we're basically using the same process as what we've used for the whole picture. Once again, we just blend this off. If you notice, there's no paint on this brush. This is just a dry brush that we're just using to give it a bit of softness. And once that's complete, once that is finished, we are then going to come in with the white just to give some little detail highlights. And we're just making sure that we're keeping the form of this so that it doesn't look distorted. Now that we've taken away the mask, we're just going to come in with a little bit of the cadmium orange, yellow ochre, a little bit of the Van Dyke brown, because if we looked at a reference, there's a slight light reflection on the back of his neck, so we just want to get that in. There we go, let's just blend all this together. So we're just putting this all together and blending it away. So as you can see, this is probably about as far as we're going to go. The next time we're going to paint on this face is when we do the background.